Blake, we are coming to you.
Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, Blake.
Hey, so I was reading the book. Troy was reading for the book club the other day, or not the other day. It was a book a while ago, and it was called like the racism in banking or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
So I started reading that, and I never knew any of this stuff. I was never taught this in school. I was just blown back that the things that the blacks have had to go through, like throughout the the years. So I was talking to some teachers about it. I'm a custodian, and I was talking to them about it, and they were kind of just like dismissing the entire thing, which they said, well, everybody's dealt with that kind of thing. They they never said that. They never took like accountability. What am I trying to say here? But they just kept putting it off, saying like, well, I would bring up Andrew Jackson. I never knew anything about Andrew Jackson. I was never taught about that in school. So I brought it up to them, and they kind of just dismissed it. And then they said, well, the Spanish have had to deal with it, and they're not even like taking anyone into consideration
Mm-hmm.
or taking that into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, like, if I don't know if that made sense or not, but
Yeah,
basically,
so it
like,
sounds like they were being very dismissive and not really holding anybody accountable.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So how are people that aren't black, how are we supposed to understand that if we're not even being taught that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're
Yeah,
not even, our kids aren't being taught that. Nobody's been being taught that. We're being
yeah,
taught, the history that they want us to know. And they
yeah,
don't want to include like all of the bad things
yeah.
that had happened in the past. Like, I don't know, like, how are we supposed to talk to our children as
Non-Black people.
non-black, and
Yeah.
just letting them know that this is stuff that black people have to deal with, because I just never knew. Like, i I never knew until I started to hear podcasts from EYL, until I heard you speak, until I read these books. This is not anything that I knew about. Is
Yeah.
there something we should teach our kids? Because I really feel like we had to all come together and talk and be able to understand each other, not dismiss what has happened and just
Right.
kind of like sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you, Blake, for asking this question and, being vulnerable enough to ask that. So, first and foremost, you've asked the $1 million question, right? How are our allies supposed to, how do, even if you're not an ally, someone who's not Black, how do you know that these things are happening, right? And, a part of the answer is the awareness. I actually had this conversation the other day that as Black people, we get tired of constantly having to teach people about us and how we are, our experiences, et cetera. But unfortunately, that's a huge part of what it takes to let people know what our experiences are, right? But CRT, right? The critical race theory, that's exactly what that's about. And a part of the reason some politicians want to keep it out of the schools is because they don't want people to know, that we're treated differently, that we're treated unfairly, because once they admit to it and they see it, then they have to do something about it. And what might we ask for next? Right? So I'm being sarcastic and a little facetious, but yeah, I think a part of it is that we have to educate people about it. But then also, if you know that, like, for example, you're in the perfect position right now. You have read or started reading the book that Troy mentioned. You've been a part of this presentation, so you're gaining more and more knowledge about what our experiences are. So now it's up to you to take this information to your family and friends and your children, and you make sure that you keep passing that information on, because that's how we all become aware, right? Like, that's what awareness is. We have to spread that, and it can't just all fall on us to tell our stories over and over again, because that in itself can also be traumatizing. We have to as Black people, be very careful with how often we're talking about these things and having these conversations and sharing our stories. But yeah, I mean, I think and I have white friends who ask me the same question. They're like, Mahogany, what can I do? I really hate that this is happening to you and, your community. And I say the best thing you can do is educate yourself, through books, through articles, etc., about what we experience. Have conversations with me if they want to. I'm always talking about race. I don't mind. And then spread that go to your most racist family members and talk to them about it over Thanksgiving dinner. That's what you do, So we have to start there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Blake.
Thank you, Blake. All right, Darlene, we're coming to you next.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, Darlene.
Thank you for this really excellent presentation on a really important topic. I this happened to me recently, and I see it happening a lot where in organizations, even if your field of expertise is not in diversity, maybe you have an expertise in something completely different. If you are one of a few or one of the only Black people in an organization, they want you to be their diversity expert.
Mhm.
And it's a lot of, it's a lot of weight because that is an area of expertise. Like, people study that. They have, techniques to address certain things. And I've seen it happen so often, like when my daughter was applying to college last year, and we were looking at some universities, and you'll see, Black faculty who have, expertise in something very specific, let's say, some special type of engineering. And they're also the ones that are being pulled to do all of the diversity stuff, all of the race relation stuff. And it really frustrates me to see that, because one, I feel like they're not valuing the field of, diversity, equity, inclusion enough to put money into getting someone who actually knows what they're doing and knows what they're talking about. And it also pulls those of us who have other areas of expertise out of what we're doing to flounder in something that we're not even expert at. For me, it felt a little bit uncomfortable to say, no, that's not my area, and I'm not the person to do that, because you also feel like you somehow have to represent. But that's something that I struggle with, and I feel like that's a microaggression. And I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I think in a nutshell, what you just described is us being the representative, in every room, every organization, every table. They want the one or two Black people to step up and to talk about, diversity or racial experiences, et cetera. And I agree with you. And someone in the comment section actually mentioned, I think when someone else was speaking, that we really need to get diversity consultants in schools, right? Or, well, for her in schools, but also in the workplace. Like, you need somebody who is an actual expert, someone who is like, for myself, like, I have an entire self-care routine that I practice because I know that what I talk about, what I deal with daily is very heavy, right? And I'm human just like everybody else. So to put that on someone who is not really accustomed to being in that type of position is completely unfair. And it's interesting because you said that you're not comfortable, saying to your supervisor or leadership that you don't feel like it's your place to, step into that role. That's what I was going to encourage you to do. But but because you're not comfortable with that, you can just simply make a suggestion, if you are comfortable, to say, hey, like I can think of, another person in a different role that might be better equipped for this. So, instead of having to go into how you feel personally, you could make a suggestion to them, and maybe they've never thought of it before because they want to keep things in-house.